Courtney Estes, Mary Japour, Leah McDermott, Sally Silver, and Gary Persinger, the commissioner. So we have complete attendance, and with that, I want to convene the meeting and start the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I am told there is no one virtually that is from the public. Is that correct, Kate? Correct. And we have one member of the public present. I want to remind anyone that is with the public that wishes to speak that on each topic there is a 2-minute limitation. I would ask first for a motion with respect to adopting the agenda.
Motion to adopt.
May I have a second?
Second.
The agenda is adopted. I will
call the question.
I'm sorry?
You have to call the question, ask if all are in favor.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I'm sorry. Are all in favor of the agenda being adopted?
Aye.
Aye.
Any objections? No objections. The agenda is adopted. Apologize for that. I also ask if there's a motion with respect to the minutes from the November 7th, 2025 meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of the approval of the minutes as drafted?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? No opposition. The minutes as drafted from November 7th, 2025 meeting are adopted. Looking at the discussion items, I want to note that we're going to primarily focus on A through D. E through J are there as placeholders for the future. We will get through A through D, and if anybody has an item that is listed E through J and wishes that to be identified and discussed, please let me know. So at this point, I want to tell you that the town has been hearing us. They have heard from the 2 consultants that we had solicited information from, and everybody should have received the development of a resilience plan for Dewey Beach that Gary sent to me and I sent out a couple of days ago. And so what I want to do first is to have Gary, if that's okay, speak about that and where the town is on this issue.
Sure, Deborah, thanks. What I wanted to do with this redraft was, first of all, try to combine some of the content from the 2 responses that we got from GMB and from Strong Environmental. And I thought we had a good presentation. We had some good discussions, some questions of those 2 potential contractors. But clearly we need to try to continue to move this forward. There were what I thought were some important points that were made in the discussion with respect to the relationship of a sustainability plan and the 10-year comprehensive plan, which is the town is just beginning to get started on. So I wanted to build that background in, and there was legislation within recent months that directs municipalities to include resilience in their 10-year comprehensive plans, to consider that as a specific issue. Now, like some of the elements that have to be included in a comprehensive plan, those are required only for municipalities that have at least 2,000 people. But what we've done in the past, at least we did with the last comprehensive development plan that was approved finally in 2018, was we pretty much included the broad spectrum of issues, because while Dewey Beach has only about 400 permanent year-round residents, the town grows tremendously into many thousands of people, far exceeding that 2,000 level. So it certainly makes sense, at least it did make sense to us earlier in the development of a comprehensive plan. I think it will make sense this time as well to include some consideration of that. So, having getting started on a resiliency plan and having that feed into the comprehensive development plan, I think is something that was an important point to include in this description. So, I included that background. That's most of what you see on the first page. The Delaware Climate Action Plan was mentioned in here as well. And then I kind of combined content from both of the potential contractors in the outline scope of work. So there's an opportunity here to discuss this, to see what people think of it. I'm also, there seemed to be some willingness for those two contractors to work together. I'd like to know what other people think about that and see how we might pursue that. So that's it in a nutshell for me.
Gary, a couple questions. You said that, that a statute had passed. You're speaking of the Delaware state government having passed that, is that correct?
That's correct, yes, yes. That's
And
right.
when you said the 2,000 person puts it over for purposes of having to include that, is that any time there's more than 2,000 or just permanent residents?
No, it's really key to 2,000 permanent residents. So, if you're a municipality of that size, you have to include all of these required elements, one of which is resilience. We're smaller than that in terms of year-round population, so we don't have to include it. But again, I think because the town grows so large, and I think because the town is, such an high importance economically, I think to the state. It certainly makes sense for us to cover that. We certainly did that in other elements that were optional, not required, for Dewey Beach in the last comprehensive plan.
And what do you see our committee doing with the two-page document that you have put together, which is a really great presentation, in my opinion?
Well, I'm hoping it forms the primary substance for, a project which, could develop into a contract. I do want to cover this issue of having the contractors work together. And, based on the discussion that we have here, I can work that into this document. And, not for the next town meeting, which is scheduled for the 13th, but probably for the March meeting, we could have a document that could be presented to the town council for formal approval.
So I would suggest, it was their suggestion themselves that they would work together. So I think that's a very realistic possibility. And, the way they spoke about dividing the work is that one of them specializes more in stormwater management and the other one specializes more in flood, and, I get sort of stuck in knowing which is when and when is which, but they've both worked with the town on those particular issues. I think it was Larry who was stormwater management and worked, who I know it was Larry actually, who did the median and all the water absorption that now goes through the median down Route 1. And then the other contractor was more a flood management.
Gary, so are you looking for us to give input to what you've put together? Or how do you want to receive our comments with respect to this document?
Yeah, we'd like to have some input. You can certainly discuss it now, or you can provide some comments later. I do want to include in here this option to have the two work together. We also have to put a cost in here. We did get some rough cost estimates from both contractors. I think one was in the $75,000 range, if I recall correctly. The other one was a bit higher than that. I don't have any funding sources in here because I'm not aware of any external funding sources that seem possible at this point. We did talk at the council level about the possibility of maybe using infrastructure funds. There is an infrastructure fund that I think would be applicable here, but there's a set of approvals that has to go through. There's an infrastructure committee that would have to go through, and obviously would have to get approval by the council, but that is a possibility as well. As I said, we're just beginning this process of developing the new comprehensive development plan. I think this feeds into it, but we also need some committee representation on the working group that we're going to put together for developing that plan. Um, we can talk about that in a few minutes. Maybe we'll finish this off, but I think it is worthwhile thinking about that and thinking what the committee's role would be. One or two
The only
volunteers from the committee would be for the committee would be certainly or for the working group rather would be very helpful.
and I just want to add that, since our conversations began or this whole process began, things changed financially. So things that were possible or before are now impossible, not even realistic in terms of grants. The one thing that might still be possible that they both spoke of is asking for grants from that don't that aren't from resilience or flood, but more like water quality or things that aren't trigger words that get kicked back out. And I think they got money from varying sources when they've done some of the other projects by doing that. So that I think in looking at the scope of work, we need to consider that the grants that we thought were possible probably aren't anymore. Um, and they did mention that, staggering the work in smaller segments, because those are big numbers, especially if you can't anticipate a grant. Um, and back to the problem of things that are probably most important to do aren't necessarily the things that we can afford. So you're balancing, the risk versus what we can actually do is something I think is important to get guidance from the council from, because money is, really going to drive the decision making.
May I make ask a question, Bill or Gary? What's the current balance in the infrastructure fund, rough number?
I think it's right around $800,000. We spent $73,000 recently on paving 3 streets that were not in the state contract for repaving. I have put in for a CTF grant through Representative Claire Hall to try to recoup some of that money, but I have not heard back from them if we will. But it should be right around 800,000, I believe, Gary.
Any other funds of that committed to known projects on the drawing board now?
So I've been working with Senator Coons' office, referenced $1 million that was approved and then was put on hold. I got a call. I sent some information to Senator Coons' office. Senator Coons met with the Army Corps of Engineers. I got a call back from the Army Corps of Engineers, and it sounds like that money will be freed, so we'll be able to do the project on Reed Street. I plan on putting something out tomorrow to the commissioners on that.
I see. So that would.
Bill,
Go ahead, Gary.
Bill, could you repeat that? I didn't. Did you say
So-
that money will not be?
So I'm
free?
waiting for, I got a phone call from the Army Corps. I've been working with Senator Coons' office now for about 3.5 weeks, provided them some data. They met with the Army Corps. The Army Corps called me, and I'm waiting for an email from them just so I can put something out to the commissioners that we will have the $1 million to do the project on Reed Street.
Oh, we will. Oh, okay. That's all I wanted to know. Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
And that would free up the remainder of that 800,000 in the infrastructure fund.
So there's 71,000 that is for a flooding project on Dickinson Street. We just got the bids back for that. I'm waiting for one more bid to come in. One of the pieces that we'll need, one of the pieces of the check valve that we're going to need for that project will take about 8 weeks to order. So I'm trying to get that moved as quickly as possible because I do not want the end of Dickinson Street on the bay side under construction in May.
Understood.
Right? And that's $71,000 that was already approved by the Infrastructure Committee, recommended to the commissioners, and the commissioners approved that.
So the net of the answer is there is ample money in the infrastructure fund to cover at least some portion of what we're talking about.
There's funding there, yes.
So when we're talking potentially staggering the project for funding purposes, I guess part of what I don't understand is how do we as lay people know where to draw the line and stagger it for cost? Or Gary, you would know, is this something that when you're soliciting bids for the project, you would be able to ask that it be broken down for what we would have to do phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, something like that?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, we can certainly go back to, I think if, we're working in good faith in essence with these two potential contractors, and if they're willing to work together, we can certainly ask them what they believe is how this thing could be divided up into reasonable phases so that we would get a good first product for a reasonable cost, and then we could begin to, phase it from there. I mean, I don't have any expertise in this kind of work either, so I'm not sure what a reasonable first step is. I mean, we could go with, some of the things that we have here in the initial parts of the outline that I put together. But my hope was, and I think I said that somewhere toward the end, that we would go back to the selected contractors, ask them to review the scope and suggest any revisions, and we could add to that their suggestions for how to phase the project in some reasonable bites.
The overall deliverable is a study and a plan though, right? That's the main, what we
Right.
expect, right? Right.
Am I correct in remembering that the contractors had indicated that they do work with clients for the purpose of trying to identify available funding?
They have said that, and Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they said that at the meeting when they spoke as well.
They did say that. Yeah.
Yes, and you can look in there, and when I spoke to them individually, they both brought that up and, rattled off lots of, alphabet numbers of where they've been successful in getting grants, all over the state. Again, I'm not as hopeful as I once was about that. But they also would know because they're, as they work on other projects. And in some of the paperwork that they presented, you can see where they've gotten funding from nonprofit and state organizations.
Well, we could build something into this draft scope of work that talks about having the contractors comment on the scope of work as it's drafted here and suggest any revisions, suggest ways to phase it. But as part of that phasing process, maybe as part of the first phase, they could begin to investigate sources of external funding that might be useful to pursue in order to get some additional funding, probably from state sources or maybe some nonprofits, as you suggested. It's pretty tough to get any federal funding these days, and I'm certainly happy but surprised that we may be able to shake loose that Army Corps of Engineers funds.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, at the crux of it, we're basically wanting them to tell us, like, what would you do? What would be the first thing you do, given limited resources and limited access? And how would you go about justifying, that in a grant proposal like that? I guess I'm just trying to think through the steps logically. We can only ask them so much before we're actually hiring them. What would you do? And we're struggling to find a place to start. And their work would be, I would focus on this, and I would do the research and the engineering studies to justify it and apply for grants. And then, combined with our own money, hopefully we can come up with the next steps. Is that sort of?
Let me make a suggestion. Maybe we should look at this if we wanted to put something to the council in the March meeting, what would we need to do to accomplish that goal?
Well, I clearly can do some work redrafting on this scope of work. I mean, I think it would be good if we could get some input from the two contractors on, first of all, the content of the scope of work. Is that, does this make sense in terms of a plan? And how could we reasonably phase it in order to do this? I'm sorry, go ahead.
It would seem to me a logical first step for any contractor is going to be to do, even if it's at 100-foot view, a risk assessment that, kind of just identifies the strengths and weaknesses, and that should tell us where we would go from there, I would think.
Yeah, that seems like the most obvious way to phase the project is study and then plan. Um, Real quick, Kelly, uh, know you said they mentioned working together. They didn't say they were incapable of doing it alone, did they?
No, no. I think because it's such a small, group, of people, they know each other well. And I think one of them does typically work on stormwater management, the other more flood. Um, in terms of the risk assessment, I think it was Brett who brought up, didn't we have a risk assessment from the past, right? It's just outdated.
It's outdated.
And I guess one of my next question would be is sort of, I've looked at this plan, I can't recall it off the top of my head, but we did things on the plan that were very successful and that we were able to fund. And there were other things on the plan that were the 10-year plan that we couldn't do. Are we just starting from scratch? Are we still trying to achieve? Are those still on the list? I guess would be one of my thoughts.
Well, I think as part of that first phase, it'd just be like a collection of everything we do have, seeing where the gaps are and filling
Yeah.
in the gaps.
Yeah, I mean, that was sort of the initial request to them. Um,
Something that was on the former plan might be totally eclipsed by
Right, that's
much
what
more pressing needs. So I think they have to look at what's been done, what's been done, what we wanted to do but didn't do, and then they need to take their own look at where they think we stand and what the most pressing risks are.
I guess I'm having a hard time narrowing down what the real ask is. We would like to hire them to do a risk assessment, and help guide us into our next steps of, where we can um, most spend the money in the most impactful way, but yet the money is an unknown sum of money.
Well, I would think the risk assessment is part of the overall resilience plan that we're looking to get. I think you can't have, I don't know how you would have a resilience plan without being able to identify
Yeah.
the risks.
So maybe, back to the idea, emphasizing the idea that this could be in stages, that we say, we would like to contract one or both of you, to develop a risk assessment plan. We would need it to be in phases because we only have X amount of money, where, and then we'll come back and finish the rest or something. I mean, I don't know what
Let me make a suggestion. I think, a lot of this information is probably in their initial proposals.
Yeah.
Disregarding for a minute what they presented at the meeting. And I think if we were to go back and look at the two proposals, we get most of what we're talking about right now. The risk assessment does need to be done, but they probably already identified that. And then it becomes a matter of developing, a scope and balance and then a plan too.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I just can't get my head around the ask, because we did get some of that information.
Well, and then if we take that information from Gary, when you developed this plan that you have, that we're looking at, did you look back at the proposals that they had made? Is that part of your research in that?
Yeah, that's where this content came from. It came from their responses.
Their proposals?
Yeah, so I mean, in some sense, I'm sorry?
Is there more useful detail in their proposal that would help flesh out your plan?
Yeah, there's not really a lot more detail. And I picked up all the kinds of studies and data elements that they thought that were worthwhile to compile and consider, and then considered the data analysis. Those are all those bullets come from one or two of the responses. And then the future action recommendations, I think those may become more from GMB. But, if we think about this, if we go to the contractors and say, okay, we've got this draft scope of work, we wanted, in the final part of this, we want to have a resiliency plan. We wanted to include short, medium, and long-term actions policy and land use recommendations and other types of solutions. And then, tell us what the best way is of getting to that final product. What
I
are the
think
phases that we could break this up into?
what you just outlined is exactly where we need to go, in my view anyway. So is that something that we can do and add to what you've already built here?
Yeah, I think we can certainly do that. I can, again, send them a copy of this. And, we could then arrange a Zoom meeting with the contractors that would include a couple of us, so that we, not too many, so that we don't have a quorum and have to have a public meeting, but just to fine tune this thing, understand how we might break it out, how the costing would work out, and then see where we end up from there.
Is there a true benefit to working with them both together, or is it just because their relative strengths are a little bit different?
I'm sorry, is there a benefit to working
Is there a
with them both?
benefit to working with both of them together as opposed to choosing one?
Well, I think the suggestion came from them and not from us.
Yeah, it was
So-
hard for me to read whether that was them just being kind to each other, or, I'm sure it's true what they're saying, but I think both of them are capable of all of it.
I would
Um,
agree, and I think that they have collaborated successfully in the past, and they have a very good working relationship. But I can't imagine that either one of them couldn't do the entire thing either.
From a cost analysis, do we have any sense of whether it would be more cost effective to have both and them do their separate parts? So that there's no subcontracting out or anything like that?
I mean, the
Or-
hard part, again, it was just hard because, especially since it's so not my expertise, but, just in general, the strong, estimates were much higher than the GMB. And I don't, it's so hard because it's an apples to apples, what were they including, they were both working independently on giving the answering the questions. Was one including more than the other? It's kind of hard to,
So if one was 75 and the other one was, as I recall, somewhere in the 120 neighborhood?
Yeah.
So why don't we focus on the savings if both can equally do the job and pick one?
Yeah, and there's nothing, I mean, unless we wrote it into a contract, there's nothing to preclude, one of them from subcontracting the other, I would assume, if necessary.
So would the cost, do we know, be that much if they work together? Or would it be somewhere in between and they would divide that between themselves if they were each doing a portion of it? Do we have any sense of that?
no.
No, and I think it gets
I mean,
really
I'm happy to speak with them again about this issue. I mean, part of me wants to say, like, look, we got 50 grand, what you can give me, what can you give me? But that's not, how I want to approach it. But I mean, that's the real question, or whatever the number is. But I'm very happy to call them again. I think the idea of like a small working group that we're sort of, I think, spinning our wheels a little bit because I can't quite figure out, having done this initial step, how to get past it. So maybe the small working group of very specific questions is a great start.
I think we definitely need to know, how would the cost be influenced if they work together? What would be the strengths or weaknesses if they did it on their own? And would they consider subcontracting it out, or would it solely be the hired entity? Because I think that may influence whether we go with both or just selecting one. And we also need to make sure that the one that's coming in substantially less expensive is doing the same quantity of work as the other.
Yeah, I mean, until we really are specific about the scope of work, I think that's going to be, I doubt that one person really charges that much more. But And they both have worked in Dewey. I mean, maybe that's a question. Who does the town have a better relationship with? One has done that storm, the median and the rain garden, and the other one has done other projects in Dewey. I mean, and maybe that's an argument to have them both because they know well what they've done and what has worked and what hasn't worked just individually. So maybe we get some sort of you know better effect if they're hammering it out together. I don't know.
How about a more practical approach? How about we've got one for 75 and one for 120. We believe that both can do the job adequately. I haven't heard anything to the contrary. Why don't we focus on the one that costs 75 and help, shore that up with Gary's help in, the scope of work that he's working on and see where it goes. If you were to look at the two of them together, it's not going to be less, it's going to be more than 75. And if we think the GHB can do the job for 75 and we have confidence in it, why shouldn't we focus in that direction?
I'm with Dave. I think if they're both capable, then we stick to one. And if we're going to bring on an
Yeah.
additional firm, it should be, or anything additional, it should be someone with, different expertise. For example, I was just thinking of
Gap at the fill.
Danielle Swallow from Delaware Sea Grant. That'd be someone who could come on and help with, going after grants and working with the town directly. She works with, multiple municipalities in Delaware on that sort of level.
Gary, am I right that this would have to get bidded out? We couldn't just select somebody, is that correct? So I don't,
We did bid it out.
Well, I don't think it has to be, Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not sure this has to be a competitive bid. I mean, it's professional services, I think, and I'm not sure, I have to go back and look at the charter and the code to see whether or not we get ourselves in trouble or not if we don't bid it out.
Kelly solicited 5 different vendors, only 2 replied. So
But we weren't, we were asking for responses, but not for, for bid, it wasn't a formal bid process.
Bill,
We
do
did
you
ask
know
them
if
for,
they have to bid it out?
So professional services is kind of one of those areas that we may not have to bid it out. It's when you start putting shovel into the ground, I understand that's when we really like the project I have on Dickinson Street, but it would be, I'd like to confirm that with Fred.
Right. So this is a plan.
I mean, I'll confirm it with Fred and let the chair know.
Do you have any sense on one of these contractors versus the other in terms of who's been easier to work with or more thorough or anything of that nature?
When it comes to stormwater management and the resiliency, I haven't worked with either one of these companies. I have worked with GMB in a different phase for the architectural for our new building, but that's a completely separate team than the one you're discussing.
So none of the prior
I was not here when we
studies.
worked with these, with either one of these if they were here in the past.
Gary, do you have any knowledge on that?
I do not, no, I've not worked with either firm. The only exposure I've had with GMB is, as Bill said, was with respect to the new town hall. I'm perfectly happy if the committee feels that we ought to, try to pursue GMB because they have the cheaper price. I will have to go back and revise some of this scope of work because I pulled content from both responses, and I would feel a bit uncomfortable using some of the Strawn stuff, in the final scope of work. I feel uncomfortable about that. I mean, I'm happy to listen to what others think about that, but there's enough content rather in the GMB response that I think we could pull together a reasonable scope of work without feeling like we're drawing too much from the Strawn response.
But we're not taking intellectual property that the other vendor supplied by including their ideas.
Yeah, I know, but there's in some sense some greater specificity in some of the response from Strawn than there was in GMB. So I'd have to go back and take a look at that.
I think that's my sort of concern about, I don't want to ask for more, given, they've they have been very generous with their time and specific. And so I'm just trying to really clarify what the ask is. And I, they both were lovely on the phone and seemed very like they would be very easy to work with. But
Who would work with you, Gary, if we were to want to go back to GMB to start with and kind of tune up the scope of work? Who would you like from the rest of the committee to have with you as a tag team member?
Well, I mean, certainly Kelly's been very involved in this, and anybody else who really wants to volunteer and be a part of it. I think, in terms of, is it the sense of the committee that we should go ahead and start trying to work with GMB since they have the lower cost? I think that's
I'm
the first
hearing
question.
that would be, and of course I want to take a vote on it and hear from the member of the public that's present, but it seems to me that was the proposal that was most thoroughly detailed. Am I correct? Wasn't that the very lengthy one?
well, I felt like Larry's presentation was really strong. I think Brett answered the questions more thoroughly initially, but he also had more time. And just to point out, Brett was the first person who really responded, and I had a lengthy conversations with. And I mentioned that I was having a hard time finding anybody else to respond, and he's the one who gave me Larry's number.
Sorry, Kelly, which is which?
What?
Who was
Oh,
the
Larry Strong. Larry is with the Strong. I'm forgetting. Larry, is his name Larry Trout?
Larry Trout, yeah.
Is with
Right.
Strong.
Okay.
Is
Strong.
with Strong, and
that was the one?
Brett Jett is
and
with
Brett
GMB.
Jett, which I never forget his name. Brett Jett is with GMB. My inclination would be to call Brett, who was my first conversation, and say, you guys discuss this. Is there a real strong reason for that, or we're looking to just narrow down the scope of work and get something specific done and hire someone, and I think he would be out. It's his chance to, take either say that it would be really helpful to have him, and I don't think him subcontracting Larry would be a bad thought either, if that's really
Well,
easier for us.
That could be up to him if it falls
Right,
within the
right.
price and the scope of what we want to do.
Right.
I
He
mean,
can certainly do that.
that to me makes a whole lot more sense than trying to
And us
engage
having
the
two contracts,
services
yeah.
of both of them. I think it could get messy. I think it's going to cost us more. And then, I mean, you just don't know how it's going to work out.
Yeah, I agree.
So
Well, and yeah, just having two contracts versus one, yes.
I think one of the things I'd like to know from GMB is whether they would be considering subbing out any of the work, because if they are, then we would want to know who they would likely sub to. I also would like to know from Gary when the next meeting is and what we would need to do prior to that next meeting for him to be able to present it to the other commissioners.
Let's see, February 13th is the meeting. Let's see, it would be the third Friday in March, and I don't have a calendar in front of me. So does anyone have a calendar handy?
But also, I mean, it
Well,
doesn't
yeah.
have to be the next meeting, right? I mean, we could give ourselves.
It
some more time.
doesn't have to be. I was just saying we
It's the
can't do it
20th.
in February.
It's the 20th. There would have to be a recommendation from your committee to the commissioners.
I guess what I'm hearing is, while it's possible we could meet that March 20th, I'm hearing that we still need to get a little bit more information before we're ready to present that for a vote by the commissioners. I'd like to hear from the committee on that.
Are gonna create a small working group. Could that act as like an informal bid process where we meet with both potential contractors and decide from there and then make a recommendation to the town?
I think that's what we're trying to avoid having to do to elongate the process.
Yeah, I kind of feel like, we have a little bit of momentum going now. We want to carry it. We want to run with it I think it's the wrong time to slow anything down.
Okay, so how would you suggest that we get the smaller committee together? Also have Gary and Kelly, at least Gary and Kelly, to speak with GMB a little bit more, and that we finalize this document that Gary has put together, so he's ready to bring it to the town by March 20th. Your thoughts on that, folks?
It's about
Create the working group now and then
Well,
set up meetings with GMB and Strawn
Is the working
right away.
group, is the working group Gary and Kelly?
I'd like to be involved if possible.
Okay, all right.
So tell me if you think this is realistic. If you all were to meet, get this together, and we rush another meeting of this committee to occur about a week and a half prior to the committee or the commissioners meeting, so that we would be able to vote on a final document that could be presented to the town at the March 20th meeting, keeping in mind that there needs to be at least a week in advance for that to occur. What are your
And-
thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I think in the process, I think the first step I think we're all coming around to is calling GMB with a small working group, sort of getting more specific on the scope of work. And, and if from that, maybe in the meantime, he has too much work and he can't even do it. So I don't want to limit ourselves to that, but start with that and assume that we go forward in that direction with them. And what does that document look like that goes to is that here's a contract and this is how much money it's going to cost? Or is this
Here's the scope of work.
here's
Scope of
just
work.
a more specific scope of work?
Right, right. And so, yeah, I mean, I think if we make that phone call with GMB, the subcommittee, we talk among ourselves and decide whether or not we think we can provide a document that this committee can approve, a week and a half or 2 weeks before March 20th. You can make a recommendation to let Deborah know, and she can decide whether or not to schedule a meeting. If we don't think we can do that, we wait till the next meeting, have the committee take a look at the revised document, and then, we take it to the council for an April meeting.
And will we be,
March 9th or 10th would be the logical date we would shoot for if we're going for the earlier date.
I'm sorry, Dave, I couldn't hear you.
March 9th or
March
10th?
9th or 10th would be giving enough time. That's the early part of the week before the cutoff of the 13th, right? We need a week before the meeting to, give documentation. So we'd be looking at maybe the 9th or the 10th for having our meeting next.
Yes, that makes sense.
Well, I'm just looking at it from a realistic point of view, and so I'm thinking we would need to meet by March 5th or 6th, the Thursday or Friday before, so that
Why?
I'm just looking at it from it not being in the middle of the week.
just to clarify, with this scope of work presented to, I don't think we're going to get anywhere without some like dollar signs, right? I mean, are
No,
we?
The document that goes to the town council would have to have the numbers in it, as well as the scope of work and the
Okay.
contractor that we're talking about working with.
Okay,
At the same,
They've already given a bid unless they're expanding the scope.
right.
well, that's
So-
right, that's true.
Why don't you three, if it's going to be the three of you, Liam, Kelly, and Gary, get together and see if you can schedule a call with Brett, is it?
Yeah.
And follow through, and then we'll know better. But if we can shoot for, enough time in your early March to have that together, then we can present on the 20th to the council.
Oh,
Yeah,
sure.
that's fine.
Okay. So is my action item to reach out to Brett and tell him that we'd like to have a conference call or Zoom with the three of us?
Yes, yes.
And try to do it as soon as possible, maybe even send over what Gary has put together, at least the second page for their input, and explain how that's being presented, and find out of those questions as the subcommittee, answer those questions that we've raised, and then put together a more refined document for us to consider, and then at the next meeting, we'll be able to vote on it.
Right.
Thoughts on that?
Will that, if we decide we want changes at that point, will that allow time for changes to be made?
So as I'm understanding it, the subcommittee's going to speak with them, modify this document, present it as an attachment for our consideration in advance of our next meeting. At our next meeting, we would vote on it in sufficient time that Gary can then take the adopted recommendation to the commissioners for their meeting on March 20th, which means it has to be there no later than March the 13th.
But if there is things we want, at that meeting, we decide we're not ready to vote, I don't see any harm in pushing back to April, because the council meets every month, right?
That's right.
So I don't want to, as much as I want to keep momentum, I want to give ourselves a chance to, be thoughtful.
Well, that's why we're saying this is what we would ideally like to do, but if you, let's say hypothetically you reach out to GMB and they say, well, we're happy to talk, but we can't do it for 3 weeks, well, then we're not going to be able to meet that time period. But if they say, yeah, we're available next Tuesday, then you may be able to work and get a refined document.
Yeah, I just want to be flexible enough that even as a committee, if we have,
If we have to
Right.
push it till April, we will, but
Yeah,
if it's
sure.
possible to do it in March, based on what I heard was an interest in taking advantage of the momentum that is happening. that we
Nothing
would-
creates focus like a deadline.
So what I'm hearing is that the three of you all are going to do your best to try to get that discussion happening as soon as possible. Once it is scheduled and you speak with him, you'll be able to better let me know if it's something that you can take the document that's been prepared and revise it sufficiently that you would be comfortable having our committee vote on it at a meeting in early March. Does that sound like a plan that's workable?
I think the sooner we can put something in front of the council, the better to actually move the ball. I mean, we've had
Yeah.
both of these since the fall. I'd like to see us try to move it ahead if we can.
So with those marching orders, what I'm hearing is we've probably discussed this as much as we can at this point. And we just need to wait and see how quickly what the subcommittee can do. And then that'll influence how we proceed for March, or if it's going to be April. Does that sound like where we are?
Yep.
Yes.
Any committee member have any more comment on that?
I'm not a committee member, but I do have one other
Yes,
comment.
please, Gary. by all
And that is, Kelly's, before you can go ahead and reach out to GMB and schedule something, but before we send them something, I still want to tweak this draft scope a little bit. While the content that we got from Strawn may not be, in a real sense, intellectual property, I still feel, a little uneasy about drawing too much content from their response and including it in our revised scope of work. So let me just work with that a bit. And just make sure that I feel like it has the right focus. It's not going to change all that much, but there's some specific things in here that I think came from Strawn that weren't included in GMB. And it may be stuff that GMB is going to do anyway, but they just didn't mention it specifically in their response.
Gary, is there anything in there about the funding sources?
I'm sorry?
Is there anything in there about the funding sources?
There's nothing in there about funding.
If
No.
not, can we just add a bullet or whatever necessary to accomplish that?
Sure.
So at this point, Gary, I'm hearing you're going to revise this document, Kelly, you're gonna reach out to GMB to see what you can do to have some kind of a video conference with them to address these other questions. And then once that occurs, the three of you are gonna revise this document, including the funding provision that's going to be included. And then you will let me know whether a March meeting is realistic or if we're really looking at April. Is that kind of where we are?
Yes, and
Yes.
I'll reach out to him and then I'll start a group email chain, I suppose. And my only other question is this document's been made public because it's part of this meeting, right?
Yes.
Okay.
You're right, you have a point, but nevertheless, I still feel the need to kind
Yeah,
of.
no, I feel that way too, just because they both have given me so much time. I want to be respectful as much as I can.
Any other committee member have a comment on this? No? Any member of the public want to speak? Yes, 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. Nice to see you all. David Thomas, 1 Reed Avenue. I appreciate Gary's comment that he's trying to pull together a scope of work. I've had a concern that more generally, Dewey has trouble at points with a clear understanding of how infrastructure projects move from an idea to a design to funding to construction. And I appreciate what Dave Davis said about what do we need to do in time for March. I'm wondering if April might not be more in the loop there, particularly with respect to funding, and particularly because it's in early March that the summit of the Rascal occurs. And if there's any place you're going to find out about funding, it's going to be at the Rascal Summit in early March. I have put together some materials here today. One has 9 parts and 46 sections on Dewey Resiliency Planning Checklist. Here's a checklist for assessment of whether the draft proposed scope of work or consultant team meets best practices for Dewey Beach. And I have 4 copies of it, so I guess that's perfect. I guess Kate can get a copy to Gary, who's not a member of the committee. We have the town manager here. We have the chairman who can get it to the rest of the committee who's here virtually. And then there's a copy here for Dave Davis, if he's being here. Sure. If the Fourth Estate was here, there'd be a copy for them. I have some other things that I want to spend the rest of my minute, and it's 10 important resiliency planning matters for Dewey. 1, start with data-driven vulnerability assessments. NOAA, Corps of Engineers and the like. Why it matters for Dewey. The town's on a narrow spit, and without precise modeling, planning becomes guesswork. 2, integrated state and federal partners early. Why it matters. These agencies control the data, models, and funding streams. Collaboration prevents the town from reinventing the wheel. I'll supply a copy of this for you. Use of transparent competitive RFP process. Why it matters. 2 vendors in a closed process, risk limited innovation and such. 4, build on what already exists. Grant applications. Why it matters. Funding agencies expect continuity and lessons learned.
If you've got a document you'd like us to consider, I'm happy to receive it, but I need to move the meeting forward, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
And part of the one document I'll give you, it's got 2 double stars next to it. One of them has a single star, along with a number of others, and that's because I see them as being missing, and one of them is public comments documented and addressed. So
Thank you.
I've memorialized
I'll get that from you at the end of the meeting, okay?
what my ideas are. And I thank you for my 2 minutes here. I knew it wasn't all going to get in.
Dave, please.
So there are red flags for avoidance so as to not have a minimalist resiliency plan that is suboptimal or lacks grants.
We are you're on to 4 minutes, so if we may
Okay,
move
great.
forward, 'cause
But
it's
I do
getting
think
late.
an RFP is important.
Okay, thank you. So I want to turn on to point B. Kate, there isn't anybody virtually appearing from the public, correct? Thank you. I'll get it at the end, thank you. So I want to turn to Sally with respect to interactions with the marketing committee and where things are with that, please. And Gary, if you can also, if you've got additional input, I'd welcome that.
Well, I'm happy to report that the marketing committee appears to be a strong committee. Patrice Gansey is chairing it, and she certainly seems to be very dynamic. They're currently working on, selling bricks for the walkway in front of the new town hall and dealing with, some of the other projects that they normally work on in the spring. I have attended all of their meetings, I think with the exception of one. And I did report to them after the council meeting on the 19th about the presentation by GMB and Strawn. And basically, that was really all I had to tell them. We were supposed to have a meeting in January, which got postponed till today, but their meeting was Tuesday. So there was a gap of a month in there where I really had very little to report. But they're very interested in what we're doing, and they're eager to do whatever they can to facilitate our work, which is a good thing.
Excellent. Is there anything that we need to do at this point, or do we kind of table this and see where it goes for our next meeting?
I think at this stage, sooner or later, we're going to start public education, I would assume. And, that's where the marketing committee comes in. So at this stage, I'm kind of just informing them as to what we're doing. So I think I'm trying to figure, I don't remember when our next meeting for the marketing committee is. It's probably sometime in early March. But if we've got a document that's been approved, I might think about sharing that with them after, in consultation with you, if you're okay with that.
Okay. Excellent. Gary, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Nothing to add. I mean, that's a good summary of the meetings that I've sat in on. Sally did a good summary. The marketing section is very willing to help. We just need to define the kinds of things we'd like them to help us with.
If maybe when we get a little further along and actually are in the study phase, the risk assessment that'll be done as a part of that would be, in my way of thinking, fodder for the marketing committee to start looking at how to distribute that kind of information.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Start with the state of the problem at hand, right? That kind of thing. Yep.
Any committee member have any other comment on that? Any member of the public have, yes, 2 minutes, please.
Hi, David Thomas again. In the list that you have for the scoping, Section E has 5 parts under public engagement, and in the 10 matters
We're talking about the marketing committee where we've moved on to B.
Yes.
It's a different matter.
And under 9, it says ensure robust engagement, which would be public engagement as to public workshops included, surveys, online engagement, stakeholder interviews, public comments documented and addressed. It points out, for our purposes of resiliency planning, seasonal visitors, businesses, and year-round residents all have different vulnerabilities. And that gets back to the need, as Dave Davis had just said, for a vulnerability assessment. So one of the ways that you make sure is that you have a scope that has a robust provision for public engagement, and that includes a fulsome series of vulnerability assessment. And that's part of Section B also, which is baseline assessment requirements. It starts off with review of past grant applications, review of past infrastructure priorities, review of capital improvement plans, assessment of municipal staffing and capability, and review of prior studies. In Dewey, it'd be stormwater, tailwater, shoreline, drainage proposals. Gets into our prompt situation.
I think that's off topic from just the status of the marketing committee, but I
Well,
appreciate
what
that.
makes it all very on topic is that if you have, and I know that you haven't really seen the document, and I only hand wrote it because I only was able to respond it because the document as to the scope only came out a couple of days ago.
I appreciate that. We'll take a look at it, and I thank you for your comments here.
Right. If I'd had more time before the meeting, I could have done a little better.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay, so we're going to turn to C, which is possible apps. As we may recall, at the last meeting, Kelly said that there were various apps that she had heard about that address some things dealing with climate change and resiliency and sustainability and flooding. And so she's done some research on that. I shared some of them that she was able to locate with you all, I think a couple days ago, as she was able to give that to me. And I wanted to hear from her a little bit more thoroughly about what she has done and what it is that was circulated. So Kelly, if you would, please.
Yeah, I'll be quick just because I feel like there's more work to be done here. But the thought was crowdsourcing, and this might be, the answer might be this should be a marketing committee issue. But they're clever apps, and all the ones I've looked at have been nonprofit, so with no fees, that do crowdsourcing, data collection. And so, if you live on Reed Street and there's a flood, you can take a photo and upload it, sort of like the ways of for traffic, the ways of flooding. And my thought was just that it might be a great way to engage the public where they feel like they're participating, and you get real life data. Some of the ones I looked at, when I went further, they weren't covering our area. Like the Norfolk area in Virginia has something called Catch the King, because they're starting to really focus on the king tides that they're unexpected, and they're starting to move down south into North Carolina, but not towards us. So, and some of the apps I tried, I couldn't really get that far. It made me wonder if they'd become defunct. But one that and I also didn't realize we have some, which one is ours? The Delaware Coast's SNAP, but it must be taken in specific locations. We have anchored, measuring sticks, and you go, and I think you scan something, and then you take a photo of what it looks like at that spot. So those are anchored, throughout, which I wasn't aware of. But the mycoast.org is an app that I was able to download. And it showed like someone had taken a picture of some flooding in Bethany, and someone had taken a picture of some flooding in Fenwick. And I just thought it would be an interesting idea as a way to engage the public, have them be able to express their frustration, perhaps, or maybe even just like when they're not at the beach, be able to see what other people are posting, and maybe they become more engaged, even if it's their neighbor posting, and they know the neighbor. And anyway, that was the thought. And And so the question is, some of them are made very specifically to help with first responding and disaster relief. And that wasn't necessarily my thought, though obviously that would be useful. But it would require participation. So that's where I think the marketing committee, could make make or break the concept at all. And that was just that, that exists. And do we want to pursue it? And I don't think it would be useful at all if we didn't really get it out to the public and have the public participate. So that was the thought.
So I hate to burden Sally with this, but I wonder if perhaps you and Sally could discuss this more thoroughly and figure out what recommendations you may want to make, or whether you would want her to make a recommendation directly to the marketing committee. What are your thoughts on that, both of you?
I'm happy to speak with Sally. It's just whether who's interested in pursuing it.
As the connection and participant on both committees, Sally, are you willing to work with Kelly a little bit more on this and see whether this is really for our committee or if it would be better at the marketing committee?
Yeah, I mean, my initial feeling is that we to do something meaningful, we should decide what we think would actually be helpful, and then hand it to the marketing committee and say, how do you recommend getting this out there?
Is there anyone else that wants to work with this issue as part of the research, if you will, to bring it back to our committee about those questions?
I'd be happy to work with Kelly and Sally on this, Deborah.
Perfect. Excellent. Okay. So,
And Deborah, can I just add one more thing? I don't think
sure.
I had it. The other app I was looking at was called Smart Buoy. This was a separate subject, but I brought it up last meeting. I just heard about it. And it is super cool. It's actually a buoy, a physical buoy, and the buoy you get for free. They have one in St. Michael's, and they've gotten those, school field trips out there, and it monitors real time. And it's associated with a website, and they're going to move it and get different readings off of flooding in that area. But the problem I found there is that it's run by you have to apply for it, and they give you this physical buoy and the software. But they ask you, like, do you know Python and all these other coding, which I don't know. And the reason it works in St. Michael's is because one of the members of their climate change committee is a deep sea ecologist, And so anyway, I love the thought, and the whole project in a whole, and I think it's international, is called Bristlemouth. Open Ocean Connecting Standard is they're trying to get open data for everybody to use, and it's a hardware, they call it plug and play. And so it's a really cool concept, and something to keep in the back of our minds. Like, I wish I could talk the St. Michael's guy into just running one for us in Rehoboth Bay, but it's just something interesting that I saw in one of the St. Michael's when we were looking at different communities. But I don't see how it would be practical for us at this moment without someone more technical on the committee.
Can you repeat the name of that?
It's called Smart Buoy, and then the Bristlemouth is the larger organization.
Do you know whether Rehoboth or Bethany or other close by municipalities are using anything like that?
I don't know, and my St. Michael's has only had it look like for like a year or so, so it might just be that new. But given that it's free, it's hard. Like, it seems like a cool thing to participate in. But yeah, I think we'd need someone with a little more expertise to, sort of ask you. I signed up and I never heard back. One man is really running it, and I, used their sort of query online thing and never heard back. And I never went so far as to try to actually call somebody or call there's a nice article, local article about the St. Michael's program, and the man there on the climate committee is called Andrew Thaler. And so if we thought we wanted to pursue it, he might be the first phone call.
Is that the one that was in the Coastal Observer that you said?
Yeah.
What I'm hearing is that you've done a lot of work on it, but it needs to be explored more thoroughly. We need to find something that's easily user-friendly, and that you, Sally, and Mary are going to work on this. Is that right?
Courtney.
Courtney, I'm
Courtney.
sorry. It was too quick for me.
I'm
there.
happy to join though, if you need extra help.
Uh,
Courtney beat me to it.
I'm hearing that this is something that we would like to explore more, but we need more information.
I mean, yes, I would say that about the crowdsourcing apps. But with the smart buoy, I feel like we should just be aware, and that if we have an opportunity to have a committee member with more expertise, then we should pursue that. But I don't imagine what we can do with it right now.
I appreciate that. So if you all can see what more you can find that might be something that would be user-friendly for Dewey and speak at our next meeting, that would be excellent. Okay. Any other comment from a committee member on this? Member of the public? Okay, we're going to move on to D, which is the flood insurance program, National Flood Insurance Program. Liam, I think you were going to speak with Gary about this. Do you have anything to report today?
Sure. Me and Gary did not speak about this, but really what Dawn kind of alluded to last time we met is that this is a slow process. FEMA will check in with the town. I forget if it's yearly or every couple of years, but basically every effort that we're doing now with the committee, whether it's public engagement or working towards this resilience plan, is gonna, give us points towards that community rating. And then it's just up to them to decide. So as far as like immediate action items that we can do to improve our score right away, there's really it's hard to pin those down, but it's all the work that we're doing until they check back in. So, Gary, did you have anything else?
Yeah, and I'll ask Bill Zolper to fill in where my knowledge is a little bit late on some of this, but we're now either in the early stages or about to begin. I believe it's a 5-year audit that FEMA comes in and does with respect to the flood insurance program. And there's certainly a number of things that we've done over the past few years, increasing the freeboard, and we've done a number of things with stormwater management and making sure that property owners are both aware and are required to kind of contain water within their own property. And we're still doing some additional things as well, but we know where we lost points in the last audit. Some of it was is a little hard to understand in some cases, but we think that things certainly have improved since the last audit. We now have the part of a hazard mitigation program. We're part of that, and we lost some points because we weren't part of the Sussex County plan in the earlier audit. But Bill, could you fill in a little bit, because I don't know exactly what the status is on that audit plan.
Yeah, so the NFIP, National Flood Insurance Program audit, was starting this fall for the town, but because of the government shutdown, that pushed it off until the government opened back up. So we're starting that program right now with FEMA, and really at this point, we're waiting for FEMA to provide us the information they need for us to provide them for the National Flood Insurance Program. On the CRS, Community Rating System, that audit is coming up also, and that will be the audit that the first 10 years, as Gary was saying on that CRS audit, there were points that were lost that were beyond our control. Some of the data that they used to give points for in the past, they no longer. One of them was below ground stormwater management. We got points for that in the past. The new metrics they are using now do not give any points for that. And then the Sussex County Hazard Mitigation Program, we weren't involved in that the last time, so we lost points on that. But we are involved in that program now, and we are a member, so we will gain some points there. Both of those audits are right now pending, and we're just waiting for FEMA to get back to us. And we're also looking for some expertise to help us in both those fields with the audit, with both of those audits, the NFIP and the CRS audit.
Yeah, particularly with respect to the CRS program, there's a whole a very large range of criteria and factors that they look at, and there are ways that they assign scores to those factors, and some of it varies depending on whether or not a particular policy applies to your entire municipality or it's just a percentage of the municipality that is affected. Down the road, I think there may be a role for the committee to look more specifically at that whole range of factors. And when we understand more about, where we're not getting points, but we think we should be getting points, maybe there's a role for the committee in developing some recommendations for what the town might do in the future to begin to improve its score. But, as Bill said, there's some things that we've done already, some places where we know we believe we can improve our score. And we'll just have to see how that process plays out.
Gary, do you think that once we get things in the hands of a consultant, that will help us to be able to know what recommendations we may want to press forward to occur more immediately to increase the points?
I don't know if I don't really have an answer to that. I think we just have to see what kind of expertise we need to have, how much input do we have to have from a consultant to get the town through this next audit process or these two audit processes. And then, based on how that goes, I think the committee can take a look at the work that's been done and begin to think through what some of the recommendations might be. There's a fair amount of work in terms of digging into the criteria that go into these things. So, we may want to put together a subcommittee at some point. It's too early to begin to do anything like that now. But at some point, we may want a subcommittee to dig more deeply into some of these things.
So what I'm
Gary,
hearing,
I wonder if it's worthwhile to name community rating system and NFIP specifically in the scope of work and ask the consultant to provide recommendations.
You're talking about for the audits?
No, for the
Resiliency
for
plan?
the resilience plan, yeah.
Maybe. I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure how those two are going to relate. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that right now.
Okay.
based on what I'm hearing, we may want as a committee to revisit this, but for right now, we have to wait until you all get the experts that you need for purposes of getting these audits done. Is that fair?
That's good from my perspective, yes.
Any committee member have any comment on that? I don't believe we have anybody virtually from the public. Anybody that is present from the public want to speak on this issue for 2 minutes, please?
Hi, David Thomas again. I think certainly the community rating system, the operation of the National Flood Insurance Plan, the town having a floodplain manager is all important, and it all gets into an issue of capacity. And that's what has concerned me. I'm hoping that the folks at Rascal or at the Sea Grant, where that was part of their charge, we can get some help. We need help. Every time we go to do an ordinance that changes our building code or our zoning code in the floodplain, that can complicate things. An example now is if you have a maintenance plan, and part of it is whether or not water shouldn't be drained toward the street or a flood drain or somewhere else. You get at one level into whether or not there's really going to be review by DEMREC, such as when we went to increase the amount of freeboard. But when you have an ordinance like that locally that does not align with NFIP or CRS, or even what's in the international building codes, you get into a situation where the floodplain manager, the building official, has to come up with a memorandum of reconciliation as to how it was handled on a case-by-case situation where you have that conflict. That's an example of how the town gets overwhelmed and doesn't have the capacity to do this. The other thing is that we could be really hemorrhaging money. I don't know that we've ever gotten the what-if printout as to how much each of those 5% increments translates to actual dollars. It certainly isn't.
Wrap up, please, Dave, because we
Yeah.
are past your 2 minutes.
I mean, I have seen a number of models and sources where that could be not tens of thousands, but that could be a 6-digit figure every year. And to not have that in place for what could be a very limited amount of payroll in terms of administrative attention is a real hemorrhaging. And one of the ways we can determine where we are on that is to get the what if printout that historically has always been available to us.
Dave, please wrap up.
Have we ever done that? Becomes the question. That's my public comment. Please document the answer.
Thank you. Okay, so I would like to table, as I said at the very beginning, the remainder of the agenda. Can I have a motion on that, please?
Motion to table the rest of the items on the agenda.
And is there a second?
Second.
Deborah, just a point of discussion on that.
Yes.
Could I change the motion to just remove these items from the agenda?
I will next time, yes.
Oh, okay, thank
I
you.
will. I was putting them on here as kind of a place marker, but, and I'm sorry if I confused anybody by that, so I won't do that the next time, and apologize if it caused any confusion. But for purposes of today, all in favor of removing the remaining items on the agenda?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? No opposition. The rest of the items have been removed. Does a committee member have any other matter that you wish to address today or that you wish to have added to the agenda for the next meeting? Hearing nothing on that, I would appreciate hearing if there.
Wait, hold on. I did have one thing real quick.
Yes, please.
Sorry, was on mute. The Rascal Summit, didn't we send somebody last year?
I believe so.
The last couple years, I think we've had opportunities for folks to go.
Yeah, is that, do we have someone going? I just think it would be important.
Is there an invite on that?
I'll have to check for the dates, but as soon as I get it, I'll send it out.
Okay,
It's March,
yeah.
I can't remember exactly, but I think it's a single digit part of March.
Yeah, I just
Early.
Googled it. I think it's March 5th.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, I mean, I could possibly go, but we have some representation there.
So I'm just looking at it.
I don't know what normally happens. I remember discussing it briefly last year and
I have attended at least
Yeah.
one of those. Looks like it's March 5th, starting at 9 a.m. at the Del One Conference Center in Dover.
and is it open to everybody? Should we just ask it if
Bill,
Usually I get an invite. I may have missed it, but I will look for that invite and send it to Deborah so we can get it out.
Okay.
And usually we don't limit the amount of people that want to attend.
Okay.
So I will send it out once I get it from Bill and anybody that's interested. Bill, do you want it to go back to you if we're interested or separately register?
You should separately register, but let me know that you're gonna be there, and I don't believe there's a fee, I'm looking at it right now.
I think it's $15 this
Yeah.
year, maybe,
The town, I mean,
or 20.
I would ask that if you do that, let me know that you're interested in going, and then I'll talk to our finance person. And if we have 4 people going, the town pays for all 4 of it. It'll be easier for us to pay for 4 of it at one time than you doing it individually. But I will check with our finance person to see how we can do that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think I just saw Danielle Swallow, who Leah
$15.
mentioned on the agenda. So, in terms of knowing more about funding, it might be useful.
I see it here for $15, so
I'm sending you the invite now, Deborah.
thank you. And I will forward it on for anybody else that would like to attend.
They're very informative.
Anybody else have a comment or an item that you'd like to be on the agenda for next meeting? Hearing nothing on that, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second?
All in favor of adjourning?
Hallelujah.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
No opposition, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.